story of Helen Keller. Reading Buzz.
Before she was 2 years old, a serious illness damaged Helen Keller's sight and hearing. Her illness was diagnosed by the doctors as an acute congestion of the stomach and the brain. The illness did not last for a very long time, but it left her senses of hearing and sight damaged for lifetime. At that time, the only person she could communicate with was Martha Washington, the 6-year-old daughter of the family cook, who was able to create a sign language with her. By the age of 7, she had over 60 different signs to communicate with her family. If she wanted bread, she pretended to be cutting a loaf. If she wanted ice cream, she would hug her shoulders and shiver. Helen was a very bright child. She got very frustrated because she couldn't talk. She became very angry and began to throw temper tantrums. The family knew that they had to do something to help her. In 1886, her mother was inspired by an account of famous writer Charles Dickens' American Notes on the successful education of another deaf-blind child, Laura Brigman, and traveled to a specialist in Baltimore for advice. He helped her contact the local expert, Alexander Graham Bell, who was working with deaf children at the time. Bell advised Helen's parents to contact the Perkins Institute for the Blind, the school where Brigman had been educated, which was then located in South Boston, Massachusetts. Anne Sullivan, a former student of the school, was then a teacher there. She herself was visually impaired and then only 20 years old. She was asked to become Helen's teacher. She was the best person to understand Helen's feelings. Helen needed not only a teacher but also a good friend. It was the beginning of a 49-year-long relationship. One day, Anne led Helen to the water pump in the garden and pumped water on her hands. She spelled the letters W-A-T-E-R as the water ran over Helen's tender hands. She repeated this several times. At last, Helen realized that the word water meant the water, which she felt pouring over her hands. This opened up a whole new world for her. She was suddenly filled with excitement and ran all around the place asking Anne the names of different things, and Anne would spell the words in her hand. This was the key which unlocked the world for her. She eventually stopped throwing tantrums. Helen learned to read Braille. This was a system of raised dots representing letters. A blind person could read by feeling the dots. Helen learned slowly but steadily. When she went to college, Anne went with her and tapped out the words of the instructors on Helen's hand. Helen had a remarkable memory, and she also had an amazing skill, which very few people have ever been able to develop. She could put her fingers on a person's lips and understand the words which were being spoken. While she was in college, she wrote her book called The Story of My Life. With the money earned from the sale of the book, she was able to buy a house. She became famous and traveled around the world speaking to groups of people. She met many important and well-known people as she traveled. Helen Keller was successful because of her determination, and she owed a lot to Anne Sullivan, who is an unsung hero.